Imagine you're looking at a balancing scale with everything you do for other people on one side and everything you do for yourself on the other side. If it isn't balanced, maybe it's time to spend a little more time on you. And therapy is a great place to start. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist online who can help you find that balance and stick to it. Visit BetterHelp.com/positive to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp.com/positive.
Jacob Albrocht, Tommy Castor. This is Sports Daily on Wichita's #1 sports radio, 97.5 and 1240 KFH.
All right, welcome in, everybody, to another edition of Sports Daily. It's Jacob Albrocht and Tommy Castor. Max Power in for Jad this week, producing for us. Glad to have Max on board. Glad to have you with us, whether you're listening on KFH or on the Odyssey app, whether you are watching us via YouTube or Facebook or Twitter. We're glad to have you with us today. The IHOP hotline always open, 869-1240. A lot to get to today. We'll have a Wichita Sports Hall of Fame induction a little later in the program. We have several topics to navigate through, a couple of which we didn't get to yesterday that we'll get in now today, including college basketball recruiting news and a story, I think, at least that has some interest, that our buddy Tim Fitzgerald has stirred up in a bit of a, we'll call it a discussion between he and some KU fans. It's not really that. It's more of an argument. But we'll get into it because it's pretty interesting as well as we make our way through. We get the start of the Western Conference Finals tonight. Plenty to get to on the show. Welcome in. Glad to have you here. Tommy, how are you?
I'm good. Hey, if you're watching the video stream right now, you're seeing Jacob rocking a hat, which I've never seen you wear a hat on the video
Because
stream.
we played golf yesterday.
Well, I was always really concerned that you weren't going to want to mess up that news anchor hair, and so that's why.
I mean, I'll show you why.
Put it back on. Yeah, put it back
so
on.
Tommy and I played golf yesterday, and so I've got, I don't have my. Usually, what happens here, Tommy, a little inside baseball. Joe asks if a bad hair day. Yes, it is, because yesterday I wore a hat, and so normally, like, I have so much hairspray in my hair to go on TV because it's required, it's necessary, that I can go to sleep and wake up and it's generally in the same place. So I'm good to go for the stream, right? I grew up, like, I was a hat every day guy for a long time, right? Like, I was hat every day, whatever. And then, now as I get a little older, there's this fear, which we've addressed on this program, of all my hair being there, like, forever. So I don't wear hats a lot anymore. I've veered away from being a hat guy, but, today I had to have one. We played golf. My hair was not, in television shape, and so I had to throw on a cap. And, like, I don't know where all my hats are, and I would have worn a Rangers hat if they didn't get shelled by the Braves last night. I wasn't going to deal with that.
I was going to bring that up.
So I didn't wear a Rangers hat, so I've got the Wichita logo hat here that wind surge on opening day, I think, or something, but I love it. It's the cool Wichita flag logo with the baseball on it. So
if I didn't have to work, if I wasn't in my office every day, I would be a hat every day kind of guy. Like on the weekends, I'm a hat every day guy. Unfortunately, I can't do that in the office. So anybody watching the video stream can see the receding hairline. That fear that you have, it's reality for me. So you get to look at me every morning and be like, man, at least I'm not like that guy.
But fortunately for you, you don't have the kind of melon that exists underneath this hair. I was like, I'll wear, Michelle's got a cool HTO hat. And I was like, I'll wear that hat. And, like, I had to resize it from where she wears it to where I needed to wear it, and it was embarrassing. Let's see if I'll show this to the video stream. So you see on these hats, like on the snapback hats, if you're watching us right now, you can see this. Like, there's not much left. Like, I almost can't fit into these, but I'm on, like, the last two snaps. So when I almost took my wife's HTO hat, she's got it, like, maybe one over, like a little kid wears it, where it's, like, all the way over. And I had to, like, adjust it and then pull it all the way. It was a little shocking. So I left her hat alone. Plus, she told me it would smell if I wore it, and so we didn't do that. But yeah, Tommy and I played golf yesterday, which is why I'm in a hat today. Long story short. And Tommy got to see firsthand my golf game, which is not up to speed, but it's all right. It's all right. I've got a
Hey, you had a chance to get out and play some golf, so that
yeah.
was
I got like
the
a
important thing.
I got like a 4 beer handicap, so
Yeah.
you know it's good. We're all right. But it was fun. It was enjoyable. I was a little concerned about the weather, but it was nice. It's been good to get this rain. It's a little chilly outside. It's a little shocking to the system. I had a kids' soccer game last night. And I don't know. It's like 60 degrees and windy, and everyone's looked like it was 30 degrees. Like everyone's in blankets and everything. I'm like, what's happened to us? Like it only took like 1 week of warmer weather to totally throw out the window an entire winter of acclimating to this cold. But I'm here for it. I hate the cold. 2 stories, Tommy, that we did not get to yesterday. And they were weekend developments in the college basketball recruiting world. And we'll start with Mackenzie Mbako because we were sort of waiting on that for KU. And we saw Ernest Uday transfer out. And we thought, or at least I did, I was like, well, I wonder if that was like a little acknowledgement from self to help Uday. But Mbako goes to Indiana and not to Kansas, which is cool for Indiana. It sucks for Kansas. I don't know what it means, right? Like it's when they lost Uday, I became concerned. I'm still concerned, and I don't even know that I thought Mbako was going to help the loss of Uday that much because the recruiting, profiles I see on him, he's not an interior guy. It doesn't sound like anyway, even though he's big. I don't know what's going to happen now, but KU, like for me, was going to be a prohibitive favorite, and now I do have some concern. They've got plenty of time to go get some experience out of the portal, and I think ultimately that's what they'll do, and then they'll be fine. But they still got to do it. I think you finish out this class with some really old, experienced players that can spell minutes and not do you harm if they have to come into the game. And I think there are plenty of those kinds of players out there, and hopefully KU can get probably 2 of them, don't you think, Tommy? Now at this point, they kind of need, you kind of need a backup player for the 4 and the 5. Maybe there's somebody that can do that, but they probably are 2 guys short underneath there.
Yeah, they're a little thin, and I would definitely say a backup big and then a wing that you feel confident in, maybe even starting, and if not starting, maybe being, very quickly off the bench. That's kind of, I think, what they're looking for right now. It was a big blow to not get Mackenzie Mbako, and that was a conversation that we had on Friday about how at least I felt relatively confident that he was going to be a Jayhawk. And I think, a lot of folks in the KU world, they were confident too. I think the coaching staff was confident. And then Indiana came through in the last minute. I think it's an NIL thing. I think that they came through with, an offer that was enticing enough for Mbako to come over. I think it was enticing to potentially play for Mike Woodson, be a star at Indiana where he – and not that he wouldn't have been a star at Kansas, but you've got other talented players on that roster where Indiana doesn't quite have that level of talent, from top to bottom on the roster. So I think that was a big part of it too. But yeah, this is certainly a blow to Bill Self because they are thin now. You feel confident about your point guard. You feel confident about your 4 in KJ Adams. You feel confident about, obviously, your 5 in Hunter Dickinson. But there are still some holes there, and there's not a lot of depth, especially at the 4 and 5. So, KJ Adams has shown, he did it all last season, that if Bill Self needs to play him at the 5, he can do it. So you would think that he would be the primary backup, more than likely at the 5 for Hunter Dickinson. But what happens at the 4 if KJ Adams has to go to the 5? So that's a big question mark. There are still some really talented players out there left in the portal. I know there is a guy that is, I think his name's Grant Nelson. He's a super senior from North Dakota State. That's a big that I think that KU will be targeting. Arthur Kaluma from Creighton is somebody that I know the Jayhawks are targeting. There are some other names out there, but they've got to get to work on that.
Well, they've got a big opportunity for players like that because, and for me, it's more of a concern to me at the 4-5 than it is at the 2-3, let's say, because if DeJuan Harris is healthy, he's just kind of like not going to come off the floor, which is fine. But it's because they have 3, 4, 5 guys that, I just feel like 2 of them are going to step up in that 2-3 spot. I don't know that they like physically don't have anybody, right? With losing 3 centers basically off the roster this offseason. We know KJ Adams can play the 5 if they need him to because he has before, but you don't want him to have to. So I think there's still 2 bodies down low short. Like that's got to be the priority here. And there's opportunity for minutes. Now, if they can go get somebody basically that would be their Kevin McCullough, that's going to be a tremendous opportunity too, because I do think they still have a pretty big need there. But again, like for that spot, for me, I'd rather see like a defensive specialist who can spot up shoot than some, elite level. Like let me put it this way. If they could, let's say it's Kevin McCullough just for the sake of this argument. Let's say it's Kevin McCullough returning or somebody just like him or Mbako for their chances to win next year. I'm going to take McCullough or that as far as making them a team to win a national title, like immediately if we're looking at that. Now, Mbako's ceiling is higher than really anybody's, right? Like there's not ceilings like that don't exist very often. But I still think even in losing Mbako, which is not a good thing, it's a bad thing. But even in doing that, I think there is room for this team to be the best version of itself if they can go find that kind of player. But now, all of a sudden, they also have these needs down low. And I think they need two people because they don't – maybe it's not 2. Maybe it is just 1 if they can go find a really experienced, versatile big. Then maybe you do only need 1 and you've got essentially a 3-man rotation at the 4-5. But that position gets injured a lot. Like, I don't know. I think they still need a little depth there.
Yeah, so I know that you are prioritizing experience over the talent level, and I get that. And typically, I might agree with you on that. I just feel like they already have a lot of experience in DeJuan Harris and KJ Adams and now Hunter Dickinson. So I would have rather had the potential ceiling. Exactly. I would have rather had the potential ceiling talent-wise of Mbako rather than a Kevin McCullough next season. Not that McCullough, is a bad player by any means, but I think
I agree.
Right. And so I just think that, if you're going to go out and Bill Self has got to go and find somebody that can, maybe fill a variety of roles. I think maybe somebody that's versatile is important. Somebody that, can play that 4 when KJ Adams is at the 5, but can also slide back into the 3 and be a wing if necessary. That's going to be important. And so I'm not necessarily thinking that you have to have this tremendous amount of experience to be successful and fit into the current system that Bill Self has. I'm just thinking you need to be versatile. You need to be able to eat up minutes and be able to, fill a variety of roles because that's kind of where the Jayhawks stand right now.
I just think there's starting minutes left. That's my thing. Like, and remember, right? And this is why I think that experience is in the short term to win a national title right now better. How many players are KU returning on this roster from last year?
2.
Exactly.
A grand total of 2.
So they have all these talented players last year, and KU's going to get attacked from 2 fronts in that regard. 1, they're either NBA ready like Grady Dick, which happens, or 2, they're like MJ Rice, and it wasn't working, so they're going to leave. And that's my point. Like, yes, it's great to accumulate as much talent, and absolutely Mbako would have been a better scenario. Getting Mbako would have been better than not getting Mbako. So don't misunderstand what I'm saying. What I'm saying, though, is for KU to win a national championship this year, getting another player is, for this year only, potentially as good as getting Mbako. Now, you'd like to have Mbako and envision a scenario where he stays more than 1 year, or he's so good that he's a one and done, right? Both of those are, but that's not always the case. And probably more often than not, as we move forward through this transfer portal era for KU, as we saw with the other 2 centers, as we saw with MJ Rice, those guys probably aren't going to be here more than 1 year anyway, unless they're good enough to go to the NBA. The
Right.
days of getting 5-star guys to be at KU more than 1 year are probably pretty numbered because you're getting attacked from 2 fronts. You're getting attacked from this tremendous talent not having the opportunity they need, or they're so good they go to the NBA draft.
And I just wonder, was there a commitment from KU to Mbako that he would be able to slide right in and start right away? Bill Self and freshman, it's always a little questionable. He started Grady Dick right away. Grady Dick is an NBA caliber talent. That doesn't always happen. There are a lot of times where he doesn't always trust freshmen. And we talked to Brian Haney about this before, where, you get into conference play deeper into seasons, and his rotation tightens up. He'd rather have guys out on the court he trusts rather than a high talent ceiling. And so I wonder if there was that kind of commitment that Mbako knew that he was going to get the minutes right away. Maybe that commitment was there from Indiana more than it was from Kansas, where, Mike Woodson and the staff said, you're going to be able to come in here and be a star right away. We can commit to you that you will start.
Sure.
And I don't know if that was the case at Kansas.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. And Nicholas Timberlake is 6'4". He could probably play some three. I would have to look back at his, scouting report to see if that's something he did at Towson. He probably did there. Can he do that in the Big 12 at 6'4"? I don't know. How tall is Kevin McCullough? He's probably not just a whole lot taller.
Probably
than
around
that,
6'4",
yeah.
6'5", I would think.
And he obviously was great there. So McCullough's 6'6", so he's got 2 inches on him. So they've got some options and they've got some talent. It's fine that Kansas isn't getting all of these 5-star guys. That's not going to be how it works anymore. They're probably going to be a nice mix, which they still are, right? Of getting really, really talented high school players, but also really, really bought in players who want to win titles. And just remember the last, and Joe Yesufu did this too. So, it doesn't always work out the way you'd hope, but Remy Martin, I'd say that worked out pretty well for KU, right? Took a minute, but he got there when he got healthy. Kevin McCullough, I'd say that worked out pretty well for KU. Those kinds of players are going to be as much a part of what KU does in every offseason as McDonald's All-Americans and as like Hunter Dickinson's, right? They're not going to get every top transfer, but they're going to get a lot of the top transfers. But what they'll get some of, which will help them win titles, is really experienced, high-level specialty players. And that will help. And they're going to go, I'm telling you, they're about to go get 2 more of them. And you're going to have a really experienced rotation that's going to be just fine. I think there's enough there because Dickinson adds so much scoring at his position that, yeah, we'd like to think of like all these points and things and who's going to shoot. Their necessity to have what they needed last year is a little bit less because they're going to get offense out of the 5. Right? Dickinson's going to provide offense, and we assume KJ Adams will continue his offensive developments. And I think we'd all like to see, right, DeJuan Harris become a 12 to 14 point a game scorer because we know how much better they are when he does that. Just get some experience and make sure they're great defensively. Get some size. Now, priority one is to go get some size.
Build some depth, be able to have a couple of additional guys that you feel confident in going to. From the bench. And I would argue, and I think that anybody that, observes college basketball would probably argue that if you knew that you were going to get Hunter Dickinson, who was the top coveted prize in the transfer portal, but you knew that you were going to lose out on Ernest Uday, Zuby Ejiofor, and Mackenzie Mbako was not going to come to Kansas, you would still probably take that, right? Like at least I would. I think
so.
that I would still probably take that.
With the way I wouldn't take it every year, but I would take it this year.
Right. And at the bottom line for me, too, is that the job's not done. Like, the portal is not closed, right? And so it's not like Bill Self and his staff are just sitting back and saying, hey, we're good, we're done. We got Dickinson. Like, they're going to go to work and they're going to add a couple of more pieces. I just don't know how effective those pieces will be. But regardless, I still feel like even though it's disappointing you don't land Mbako and you lose Uday and Ejiofor, you still feel, I think, fairly solid with the way the roster is made up for next season.
Yeah, I do too. Oh, I definitely feel so. Like I said, losing Mbako to me doesn't take them from the 3rd favorite to win a natty to the 10th, right? I think they're going to be fine because I fully expect they're going to go get somebody. There are plenty of guys left in the portal. Kenny Pohto is an example. He's no longer in there because he's coming back to Wichita State. Let's take a break. That's where we're going to talk next. Pohto returns. And, man, I think this is a really big deal for Wichita State. Let's talk about that when we return. We've got more to come. We've got a Wichita State Hall of Fame induction. We've got some drama between KU and K-State and state money and stadium funds and all that kind of political nonsense that we'll get into a little bit later as well. 869-1240, it's All Brockton Caster. It's a Tuesday edition of Sports Daily. We'll be right back.
commercials are over.
Yo, I haven't got all day.
869-1240.
Time to get busy.
This is Sports Daily on KFH.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Sports Daily here on this Tuesday edition. Glad to have you with us here. 869-1240, the IHOP hotline, always open. We're talking a little college basketball recruiting. We mentioned Mbako going to Indiana. Chris on YouTube says, tough break on losing out, but Self is the best coach in college basketball. He'll figure it out for sure. Rock chalk, I think he'll figure it out. I'm not terribly worried. It's a loss, but no big deal. They'll just move on to the next guy. I think they're going to go get some players that will really help them win next year. It just emphasizes the need underneath. One player that was in the portal at that spot that is no longer in the portal at that spot is Kenny Pohto, who returns. We wondered if this was possible. We'd seen Pohto at Paul Mills' introductory press conference. We know he'd been working out with the team, and some reports, including by Taylor Eldridge over the weekend. Pohto, I think Draft Express had it too. Pohto is returning to Wichita State. That leaves 2 scholarships for them, but it adds, Tommy, a player back on the roster. Like if we had to talk about all the players under Paul Mills, to me, Kenny Pohto is the most interesting because Mills has had some bigs. I think Poto's versatility is unique. I love the skill set of Kenny Pohto. And again, we don't know what kind of offense Paul Mills is going to run. He says it adjusts by the players, but if it's similar to what it was, to Oral Roberts the last few years, I think somebody like Pohto could be really interesting. We know he can shoot. He is, he's not a traditional center, but he's a guy that's versatile in a unique way that I'm more intrigued by him, Tommy, than I have been for any other Shockers with their potential to play for Mills. I'm really, really excited about this.
Yeah, this is a big deal in a variety of ways. I think it's important for the fan base because there's a little bit of familiarity there. And we know that Colby Rogers will be playing for Paul Mills, but he doesn't have any experience up to now, to this point, as a Shocker. He sat out last season. Quincy Ballard didn't play a ton, and I know he's returning, but really Pohto is one of the main guys that you can look at and say, okay, like there's somebody for the fan base to get behind that's familiar, that the fans know already. It's not a completely brand new team, but I do think that pairing him up with Jacob Germany, that's going to be important too. And I don't know exactly what the plan will be for them. Is it one of them starts and the other one backs up, or will Pohto play the 4 and Germany the 5? I don't exactly know the way that's all going to come down, but Germany had quite a bit of success at UTSA and averaged, over 10 points a game. I think he averaged 7 or 8 rebounds a game, so he was effective for UTSA last season. So I don't know if the plan from Mills is to play these 2 guys in tandem with one another, or really how it's all going to pan out. But I do think that this is an important piece in a variety of ways for Wichita State.
It is, and I don't think it matters yet. I think we need to see how Quincy Ballard bounces back first if he's healthy. Because if he's healthy, he's definitely going to be a traditional 5, right? Like that's the kind of player he is. I think Pohto and Germany can both be versatile enough to run it a little bit and play the 4. We haven't seen Germany, but that's the indication I get. Pohto we know can, right? And now you've got like a Twin Tower situation, which will be unique and hard to match and be difficult to match up with, to have 2 guys of that size. And you've got to adjust on the other end of that too. But I think what we're seeing for Paul Mills is a roster that's plenty talented and a roster that will compete in the AAC next year. Pohto sort of completes that. Now we'll see what else comes in, but the caliber of player that is now on the Wichita State roster is high. I think you've got a collection of players, and when we talk about Harlan Beverly and Ronnie DeGray and Bijan Cortez and Quincy Ballard for that matter too, you only really get one free one anymore as far as transfers. So I think you're building a foundation now of players that will grow within the program too. Like, it's harder for those guys to transfer out. So, and we don't know, right, about, I shouldn't say, we don't know yet about Ronnie DeGray. We'll have to see what his transfer status is. But either way, you've got guys that are going to be there a while, and that's going to be good and important too. So I like it. They've still got a couple spots to fill. I'd love to see him go attack high school that way, and get some talented young players. But, whatever it looks like in this first year, transfers were going to be a big part of it. There was no question about that. Now we'll see the rest of it. But I think this roster, as it currently stands with Pohto, is a team that will be in the top 3 or 4 of the AAC. And we go back to all the conversations we had begrudgingly to some degree, Tommy, quite frankly, with a lot of Shocker fans. But this is what we expected. This was the expectation from us. And right now, on paper, the expectations being met. I've got no issues. I'm excited about this roster. I think it's good.
Yeah, look, I think it'd be a lot different if you only had brand new incoming players that, maybe didn't star at their previous schools, like Harlan Beverly, Ronnie DeGray, Bijan Cortez, these guys that were playing reserve minutes for programs like Oklahoma, Missouri, Miami. There's a lot of unknowns with them, right? Like, can they take that next step in a program like Wichita State? But being able to bring in some consistency and some familiarity with Kenny Pohto, it helps bridge the gap a little bit, I think. And then, like I mentioned before, with Jacob Germany and the skill set that he brings to the table and the success that he had at his former program, that helps it out a lot, I think. Like, you don't have to necessarily just lean on these newcomers that haven't shown up to this point in their careers that they can have a leadership role on a basketball team. I'm not saying they can't do it. I think they certainly can. We just don't know that at this point. And so having a mix of newcomers and returners, that's extremely important to build that familiarity and to be able to connect with the fan base. I like it. I was incredibly excited when I found out that Pohto was coming back to Wichita State, because I do think that the opportunity is there for him to take the next step in his career.
Don't you think everybody's a new player, though, with a new coach? Like, it feels to me like even returners are new players when a new coach and a new style comes in. So, I mean, like, the talent is like I feel like a base level of talent foundationally is critical, because even Kenny Pohto, like right now, I mean, Kenny Pohto is as much of a new player as Jacob Germany, right? Like, if everything's changing, now he's not to the fan base and to, the great facilities and all those things. And that does have some advantage. We know he's comfortable here. But everybody's new. And so getting a talent level, a talent floor is important. And I think that we're seeing that right now. ASMUS didn't happen. And I think it's very easy to understand why it didn't happen. But other than ASMUS, like, that was the one where everybody looked to try to, like, okay, they're going to be able to. I still think, high level players and recruits are coming for Wichita State for all the reasons we've talked about so many times. But we're going to have to give it some time to build a foundation to do it. It is very, very important that Wichita State is good this year and builds on momentum and starts to fill the arena again and gets the NIL excited and the base excited. Because if they can be good right away, then it's just going to be a domino effect. And we're going to see these high-level players come in. And it's really exciting to think about and consider, and I just think everything has gone very well. Again, on paper, we haven't seen anything, but on paper, I'm satisfied. Like, I'm happy with this, and I think Mills and staff have done a really good job with this class and putting this group together, and now we'll see how they attack those last 2 spots. I think they could do just about anything. I think they have, like, supreme versatility and availability to do whatever they want.
And look, I think you're right. On paper, I'm okay with it. I don't have an issue with the way that this class and this team has been built on paper. I just wonder how much leeway at the beginning of the season do we give to potential growing pains and them trying to find their way and that sort of thing. I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but how much leeway and patience can be afforded to Paul Mills in this program if the priority, which you just mentioned, and I don't disagree with you, is you've got to try to get that momentum back and re-engage and fill the arena and all of that. How much leeway can be afforded to them?
I think some. I think more than, with a new coach, I think you're going to get a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. I think it's important that they handle the exhibition type games well, and then you'll be okay. Um, because it is hard to know, but I do think fans in general are going to let it breathe. Now, are they going to let it breathe into, December and January? No, probably not. But in October, maybe into November, yeah, I don't think it'll have too much of an impact. But again, I think that I just think it's very unlikely that Wichita State struggles mightily early on. I don't think that was going to happen no matter, who was coaching, because I think they're always going to be able to get some level of talent. This is a more talented class, than we've seen in this transfer era, at least by what we know about on May 16th, right? Obviously, Jaquan Walton was a tremendous talent. And James Rojas was a tremendous talent. Like, you could see quickly, like, where those guys were, top level recruits and why and all those things. Like, it was like, okay, these are really good players. But we didn't know that before they started playing. This group's a little different, right? The floor seems a little higher. Is the ceiling as high? I don't know. That's what we got to find out, right? That we've got to find out if the players are to that level. And I think that they probably are. But,
Yeah.
we still do have to see that.
And we mentioned it multiple times before that it was very clear and at least obvious to me. I don't know about anybody else, but it was obvious to me that the strategy for Paul Mills was to go and find players that had a fairly high ceiling, but for whatever reason, it kind of goes back to what we talked about in the last segment. They had talent, but they weren't getting an opportunity to star at their previous schools. That's really the priority. And so I think that profile of a player you can apply to Bijan Cortez and Harlan Beverly and Ronnie DeGray. Like there became a pattern in the kind of player that Paul Mills wanted to attract. That's great because a lot of these guys were very highly regarded coming out of high school when they went to their programs. Now the question becomes, what does the development part from Paul Mills and his staff look like? And can they help these players develop and take the next step in their careers? And that's where I'm most interested in watching this program develop, are these players that were highly regarded coming out of high school, didn't really get a chance to shine at their previous schools, and seeing what kind of development Mills and his staff can take with them.
But weren't you the most confident when we talk about like the resume and the criteria for Mills coming in? Weren't you the most confident in that ability?
Sure.
Right? To actually
I think that's why
coach.
he's got the job.
Yeah. And so like the questions became, coming from Will Roberts, well, can you get what's going to be necessary consistently talent-wise into Wichita to play for Wichita State? Can you rally the fan base and get everybody excited? Those are the questions. Like coaching ability, I think Paul Mills was at the top of most lists of available candidates for a reason, right? The Baylor tree, all the success we've seen coming out of the Baylor tree, all those things. So it's exciting. Good place for Shocker basketball. We'll see how they finish out the class. Really, KU and K-State, all these classes still have some rounding out to do. Sports Daily, Jacob Albrock, Tommy Castor. Tommy, before we get to a Wichita Sports Hall of Fame induction off the top, story that caught your eye yesterday, stirred up by our K-State insider and buddy Tim Fitzgerald. Give us the backstory here, and we'll sort of dive in a little bit.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So, of course, we know, and this has been public news for a while now, that KU Athletics, they are working on a renovation for Memorial Stadium, for the football stadium there at KU. I believe it's a $330 million overall project. And so our buddy Tim Fitzgerald from GoPowerCat.com does his daily delivery videos. Did a video the other day, I believe I don't know, it was either on Friday or Saturday, did a video where he was critical of the University of Kansas and the athletic department in the way that they are getting funding, receiving funding for this stadium, saying that it's public tax dollars in part that the university is utilizing to build this stadium. Meanwhile, the Kansas State University, for all of their projects, they're using private dollars, donors, and that sort of
Donor
thing.
money.
So that was the controversy. It's not the only controversy surrounding this new stadium renovation. There were some students with the student newspaper at KU that wrote an editorial in opposition to it. So there are certainly some things going on with this stadium. But I know that Tim Fitzgerald, unhappy with the way the funding is being allocated. One thing about our buddy Fitz, he definitely is vocal on Twitter. He's gotten into it with a couple of state politicians about all of this, and so that's kind of the drama going on right now.
It's interesting, and we'll have a chance on Thursday. We'll get more into the details of it from Fitz. I think at the surface level, because these kinds of stories I've got to put on like my other hat to really dig into. So I'm not gonna be overly detail oriented here because I haven't read it yet. You just pointed me to it this morning. But I think in general terms, it brings up a discussion of public money, right? However it comes, whether it's state or federal, and there's some confusion in this story about which it is. It sounds like it is a federal grant given to the state of Kansas. That's still public money, right? Federal grants come from our tax dollars, so does state money. It's your money, right? Like, it doesn't matter to me if it's federal or state. It's still tax dollars, which matters. I hold that stuff to a high importance. And so, it comes into play here on these types of things. And if you see this story, some people are pointing out that the grant portion of this is being used for non-athletic parts of this, but Fitz's point is it's all one project. What difference does it make? I think that that's an important point because even if it is grant money, it's still tax money, right? It's not like the government can maybe they can, but it's not like it's just like brought up out of thin air. Like, we have a real debate and serious situation happening with a debt ceiling and all this stuff. Like, tax dollars don't just appear, they're tax dollars. And so, at the surface level, I think as you discuss and look into this, it's should that sort of money be being used for college athletics? And I think that is a hard pill for people to swallow. And I think that it's very understandable why there are a lot of people that would say, hang on a minute, my tax dollars don't need to go to fund your football stadium. I don't go to school there. I don't have any kids going to school there. You're probably not going to win an argument that this is like driving the state's economy to renovate the KU football field. That's a bit of a stretch and probably a little bit different than if, say, you got the Chiefs to come across the border, right? I think those are two very different things as far as economic drivers. Might drive the local economy in Lawrence, probably will, right? But does it drive our local economy in Wichita? I don't know. So I get it. I get I get that part of it. I also get the impact that go ask the University of Alabama if Alabama football drives the state's economy, because the answer is absolutely and unequivocally yes. So I get it. I totally understand both sides, and that's where the discussion comes into play. I would much rather see that money come from private donors. Absolutely, there's no question about it. I think that's better for everybody, right? Then it's not my tax money or your tax money. It's somebody else's money that they can spend however they want. They're two very different things, right? I get it. I get both sides of this.
I know that there is a pretty large, wealthy donor base with the University of Kansas. The issue has been they have attempted to renovate their stadium, build a new one a couple of different times, and they've never been able to raise the money, at least the amount of money necessary for it. At the time, in previous attempts, the football program was so terrible that it was really hard to convince those really wealthy donors that was a good place to put their money. It was kind of the which came first, the chicken or the egg kind of mentality. And the argument was you invest in the stadium, you're going to be able to attract better players, and then the program's going to get better. And then I think a lot of the donor base said, no, we want the program to be better before we want to invest our money. Yep. So that was the rub in previous iterations of this. My only question, and I would love to, we'll talk to Fitz about it on Thursday. My only question is, if this was a federal grant that's being allocated, is it a use it or lose it kind of scenario? Is it a scenario where the money's already been allocated, and if you don't use it for something, it goes away? This is a little bit different than, going to the taxpayers and saying, we want you to vote and pass a bond issue like what happens in high schools, all that sort of thing, more than the money's already there. It's already been allocated as a federal grant. You don't use it, does it just go away? I don't know the answer to that.
The easy flip side to that is I'm sure that if we thought real hard, we could find better ways to use $50 million. You know what I mean? Like we've got plenty of deficit areas in the state budget where you would have, like, I saw special education brought up, and I know this because I'm a parent now and I hear this concern from parents. Would you rather, as a taxpayer, see $50 million used to fund special education and help those kids in public schools? Or would you rather see it, at a football stadium? I think for a lot of people, that's a really easy answer. And so that's where the discussion comes in. And I'm not saying that is some definitive statement. I think big picture, there are discussions that need to be had on how to make the state a more it's a really interesting topic, and we're not going to just surface area hot take this thing. We want to have a thoughtful discussion about it because it does impact everybody, and I do think it's interesting from all sides. We're going to take a quick break. Paul Savage comes in. We got a Wichita Sports Hall of Fame induction to do next, and we'll get more Sports Daily on the other side. Jacob Albrock, Tommy Castor, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Hour number 2 coming up.